Hey guys, and welcome back. So in today's video, we are going to be investigating 3 words that you need to say perfectly if you want to sound just like a native English speaker. So if that's you, please keep on watching. So to my subscribers, welcome back you guys, and if you're new here, welcome. My name is Victoria, and I post for those of you who are looking to master the American accent. So if you haven't done so already, you should subscribe. Now, I've already said it at the beginning, but I'm going to say it again because it's worth mentioning that these words are words that you want to master if and only if your goal is to sound like a native speaker. If your goal is clarity, if you want to be easily understood by everyone, then I'm going to be getting into some details that I honestly think are not going to be super important to your intelligibility or being well understood. So keep that in mind as you watch this video. All right, so the first word that you need to master if you want to sound like a native English speaker from North America is the word to. To. So right now I'm pronouncing that word in its full form. So how I would read it if I was, say, reading a word list. So to, there are only 2 sounds. The first one is an aspirated T, so it's kind of noisy. And then it goes into kind of this moving oo sound that's definitely very different than a pure oo. So it's not tu, it's tu, tu. If you're having trouble hearing the difference between tu, then go back a few seconds, slow down your YouTube playback speed in the settings, and listen to it a few times because hearing it is honestly half the battle. So here's the trick though. We only say the word to as to when we're producing it in its full form. But because to is one of the top 5 words in spoken English and it's a grammatical function word, guess what? It's being reduced most of the time, the grand majority of the time. So unless someone is being emphatic for a reason on that word to, we're not actually gonna say to most of the time. So what do we say instead? A really, really common way to say this word is t. So that aspirated T is still there. However, instead of oo, a nice tense moving vowel, I'm saying a schwa, t. Another variant that you might hear instead of that aspirated T is actually an alveolar flap, depending on what sound came first. So ra, ra. And the final variant you might hear is just schwa on its own. So the most common expressions ever, wanna, gonna. It's of course spelled want to, going to, but there is no T, there's no D, there's no alveolar flap. That to really is just becoming up. So really pay attention to that. Really pay attention to the entire context to help you determine whether you should be saying to, ta, ra, or up. The second word that you need to master if you want to sound like a native speaker of English is the word of. Of. So right now, again, I'm saying it in its full form. So the vowel is a lax a sound, and it's going into a v sound. Even in its full form, it's actually really tricky to perfect for a lot of my clients. So for that first a sound, I usually hear more of a. So it's not of, it's of. So if of sound really similar to your ears, again, go back a few seconds and repeat it a few times at a slower speed. The v sound is voiced. So this is another area in which I often hear a little mistake. I often hear uff. So 2 things here. Make sure that the vowel leading into that voiced v is long enough, and keep your vocal folds vibrating because the word isn't uff, it's of, even though, of course, it is spelt with the letter F. So this is just a huge spelling trick, but never, ever should you pronounce the v as a f in this particular word. So I know some of you might be thinking, what's going to happen to of if it gets reduced? And it does get reduced very frequently because it's not a very shiny, interesting word. So why don't you tell me what's happening if I said, for example, do you want a cup of coffee? Do you want a cup of coffee? What's happening to of? So the v is totally disappearing, right? So we're left with a little tiny schwa in isolation. If you're wondering if this is just a sloppy way to speak, the answer is no. It's an allowable part of English because English is stress timed. So you'll hear everyone across all classes and level of education reducing the word of because that's just how English works. So the final word that you need to master if you want to sound like a native English speaker is the word and. And. Now this one is really tricky because of that nasalized vowel at the beginning. So it's technically an a, tense a sound. However, because that N comes right after it, it's like you're superimposing them. So some of that nasality, so that nasal airflow is going to start during your vowel production. So this one, if you're not sure how to produce and, honestly, it just takes a lot of time, a lot of recording yourself, going back, getting that auditory feedback to make sure you're not under nasalizing it or over nasalizing it, because you don't want it to sound like and, because that's a little bit much, you'd agree. But again, you're only going to hear and if it's in its full form. So if I'm being dramatic, if I said, and don't forget to pick up the butter, or something a bit more exciting would have worked as well. But if and isn't being produced in its full form, then there are two different ways that you'll hear it. So the first is making that and, so that really tricky nasalized vowel, reduced to a schwa, and. So I want to learn how to paint and, I don't know, some other stuff too. And. Okay, so you'll hear that. And the final way that you're going to hear this word pronounced is without that nasalized an. It's without that D. It's really just an N, the N sound on its own. So, Okay, so I want you to meet Amy and Tony. Amy and Tony. That's all. So to illustrate this point a bit further, I'm going to read you guys a sentence in which I'm naturally going to reduce all these words. So listen to what it sounds like when I say, Amy and Tony want to have a cup of coffee. Amy and Tony want to have a cup of coffee. So it sounds totally natural and like nothing special, right? I'm getting my message across clearly. But what would it sound like if I did not reduce those words? So it would sound like, Amy and Tony want to have a cup of coffee. Amy and Tony want to have a cup of coffee. So you can hear that it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't sound natural. It's really, really choppy and unnatural sounding. So I know many of my clients think as long as they're being clear, then that's optimal. They're going to be well understood. But I hope I've illustrated to you that this definitely isn't the case. You want your pronunciation of a given word to fit the context, and you want to be stressing and reducing appropriately. All right, you guys, I do hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you think anyone you know will find this helpful, then please share it with them. I super appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.